everyone. Richard Carlton here. There I am. Make me full screen, Margaret. There we go. Awesome. Welcome to another day of awesome training at fmtraining.tv, where every day is a great day to talk about the FileMaker platform because the FileMaker platform is so awesome. So today is going to be a really exciting day. We will get to that momentarily. Let's talk about the upcoming broadcast schedule. If you go to fmtraining.tv, what you can do is you'll come to the website right here. You scroll down, you hit the live tab right here. You can see the upcoming broadcast schedule. This is real FileMaker data coming out of a real FileMaker database using the data API. It's very exciting. So tomorrow is going to be another excellent day. It's going to be kind of strategies that RCC uses to mitigate exposure points in the FileMaker platform. Monday is for beginners. So today is kind of advanced. Tomorrow is kind of the same kind of I would say intermediate to advanced, although if you're a beginner, definitely listen to what we have cooking for the advanced days because it's good stuff to know. And then next week, we're going to have Christian Schmidt will be in for a couple days talking about, we haven't given the Windows users using FileMaker Pro enough love, right? So we want to give you some more love. So this is the Windows users. We're going to give you pets. And so we've been doing a lot of Mac stuff. And the Windows people were like left out. So we're doing Windows specific stuff on Tuesday and Wednesday. I think it'll also work on Mac too, but really the goal is to make the Windows people not feel like secondhand citizens, right? And so that's the plan. Next Tuesday and Wednesday, we're doing a Windows image import with the Monkey Bread plugin, right? Pretty good. So Monkey Spread is next week with Christian Schmidt. He's pretty awesome. This is the upcoming broadcast schedule. Let me pivot here real quick. Oh, as a reminder, so fmtraining.tv, while all this content is totally free, we do create a ton of courses, over 100 hours of animated recordings, different than the live stream. The live streams are kind of a day-to-day ad hoc kind of throw together, kind of the latest, greatest stuff. But it's not a cohesive training format. If you want the cohesive training, you need these courses. We don't sell the courses anymore individually because there's too many courses, right? There's like course and course and course and course and course and course. And so what we have is our bundles right here. Check out our complete training bundles. If you want to support the channel, you want us to keep the lights on and pay to keep everything running, this is how you support the channel. I highly recommend the complete bundle, which is great. It helps balance the budget and keep things going, and it gives you access to absolutely everything. And when people email us for tech support, I look to see if those people have ever bought anything from us, and that kind of sorts their way into the tech support queue. So if you have bought complete bundle training, you get much higher up in our tech support queue as we go through and triage questions and answers. If you're a person who's never spent any money with us and you ask for free support, when we're done dealing with all the paying customers, we will come and help you, right? But in that order, right? So if you have to pay to play a little bit if you want premium support. As a reminder, we do have the FileMaker certification training. Larry the Marine is signing up again to go for it. He's going to go for the long bomb on the football game to win the game in the last 20 seconds of the game. And so we're going to be sliding an extra day of live certification training in right around March 1st, 2nd, right around that time period, if possible. We're going to confirm with Larry the Marine and make sure it's a good time for him because he's going to take the test again, and we want a big P for pass, right? It's D for done, right? Literally, you can have a score of D as in Delta, which in most grade school, that would get a note home to your parents saying you're a bad student. But in the world of FileMaker, a D is the same as a P for pass, and it's awesome. You're done. You're good for 2 years, and you don't have to do it again. So anyway, so if you want the access to the certification training, you come over here. But at the end of the day, you're going to end up looking to get our complete bundle right here. So let's talk about this strange topic for today. So there's this guy named HOnza. He's from 24U. He is a pretty interesting guy. You know why I really like HOnza? Because he's really smart. He's very technical. We really don't compete directly against each other, which is great. He creates a lot of unique things, which is awesome. Things that no one else in the FileMaker community does, right? It's like Jesse Barnum. Jesse Barnum creates a sync product, and then promptly 2 or 3 people try to compete against Jesse doing sync. And I always hate it when that happens, right? And so 24U does some really interesting integration. They do some IoT integration. HOnza is this guy who effectively, he just lives and breathes doing performance testing and tuning. He's always been interested in performance. And so we have him here today to talk about the latest news in the world of FileMaker performance. In fact, that's him, I think, right there looking the other way. It's a really good shot of his ear. HOnza, you're a performance guy. You do a lot of cool stuff. I'm looking forward in the future to you coming back and us talking about various different things that you're doing. But why, you're an expert at the intricacies of FileMaker server performance. So what are we talking about today with you? What are we doing?
Well, it will be various topics, but I would not concentrate only on FileMaker Server, and I would not say FileMaker Server is the only thing in the FileMaker world that matters in terms of performance. I think the most important thing is to think about what you are doing with FileMaker and what you want to achieve, and then depending on that and what you need, will tell you where you should focus on measuring and tuning your performance. So it's not only server, it's also the client, whether it's FileMaker Pro, FileMaker Web Director, FileMaker Go, and also all that stands between them, like the network. And
Okay.
I intentionally mention network because it has always been one of the most critical factors for FileMaker performance, and it remains to be so even today.
Okay, cool. All right. Well, if you want to show your screen and dive into this conversation.
Okay, great. So I hope you see my screen where I'm
Yep.
currently showing our website and specifically the page which you can find under tools called BenchTest. And this is the latest tool that we provide free of charge to everyone to test your FileMaker environment performance, whether it's just FileMaker Pro running locally on your machine or FileMaker Pro connecting to FileMaker Server that sits on the other side of the world. So this is the latest tool that we have, and this evolved from us creating the tool internally for our own testing previously to test different ways of do the same thing in FileMaker to find out what is the fastest way. So that started probably 12 or 13 years ago. And just last year, we turned it to a tool that everyone can download and run the same standard set of tests so that you can compare with each other. So this tool comes with 1 million test records, which are randomly generated, but using an algorithm so that everyone gets the same test data and the test results are comparable. And we have 126 predefined tests in the tool that when you run the standard test that you go through them in a script and measure every single test, how long it takes, and compare it to a standard test that we run on a reference machine, which is actually an old Mac Pro sitting in my office. And after running those tests and comparing the results, the tool gives you a score which tells you how much your environment is faster than the reference environment. The key information here is the different factors play different role depending on what you use. So there is not just one single value that you get which tells you this is faster or this is slower. You can have a setup which runs extremely fast finds and searches and sorts and things like that, but will be very slow in modifying large sets of data in a script or using some kind of data processing algorithm. On the other side, you can have a different setup where modifying data and working with data will be very fast for 5 or 10 minutes. And after those 10 minutes, it becomes very slow. And specifically, if you're using cloud, this is very common situation because cloud servers are typically designed to give you burst performance for a short moment of time, but at the cost of decreasing the performance for the rest of the time. So depending on what environment you use, you can find out which operations in FileMaker are fast in your situation and which are slow. And so the same technique that will be optimal for local FileMaker client running FileMaker server on the same local network will not be the same that you would use in a situation where you have a solution installed on a cloud server and clients connecting to it from from around the world. So this is what you see on our website, and we also have live results listed here. Where if you run the test, if you use the tool and run the standard test, you can submit your results. Your results will appear here, and you can compare them to the others. We currently have two tabs here for single client and local tests. That's divided mostly because the situation is completely different. If you are running your FileMaker solution locally in FileMaker Pro from the hard drive, there is no network connection affecting the performance, and many actions are extremely fast. But you obviously cannot take advantage of some specific things like offloading some complex calculations to the server and only receiving the results from the server. So everything lies on your computer and its performance. On the other side, if you connect to a server, then there are operations where you can leverage the power of the server machine. There are operations where you can leverage the power of the client machine. And then there are operations which are extremely sensitive to the network speed and latency. So that's why we divided the results to two groups. And going forward in the future, we are probably going to divide them into more groups so that you can really compare similar setups to each other. What's interesting here is that, as you can see, the latest result submitted here was submitted recently by me, and that's because I finally, luckily, received my new MacBook Pro ordered in October 2021. So I didn't want to hesitate, and I wanted to try how the M1 Max processor compares to the other potential available computers for running FileMaker. The same is here in the local configuration, and it really was kind of expected, but it was very nice discovery that what we expected from the new Macs is really here. Apple really released a beast that we can use for FileMaker and leverage the power that we get in the Apple Silicon. Okay,
so
you have a question.
I have a question. So this test right here is there's no server involved at all. You're running it all locally, or is that the local button? What's the difference between these two buttons?
Yes, the local button is FileMaker file open locally from a hard drive in FileMaker Pro, and that's it. Single client is a setup where you have the BenchTest tool installed on FileMaker Server, and you connect to it using FileMaker Pro from using a single copy of FileMaker Pro. The tool itself supports also multi-user testing, but we do not have enough results collected from the community to display on the website yet, so that to show some comparison. But that's one of the things that we hope to have on the website as well, because that's one of the unique features of the tool, and I will say a little bit about it. That unlike other performance testing tools which use simultaneous server-side scripts to simulate multiple clients, we test real simultaneous clients.
Right.
Which is not the same thing, because if you run multiple scripts on the server, you are always limited by the server resources. But if you really have 10 or 20 clients connected to the FileMaker server running the same tests, that's when you really are testing a similar situation to having multiple users connecting to your server.
So this is a single client And then I guess in this case, the server and the client are on the same laptop. Is that what this is?
Yes, and this is one of the things that is probably going to get a separate category as well. So you want to differentiate between client and server running on the same machine and client and the server running on different machines.
Yeah, yeah,
Where this is easily noticeable is that when it's running on the same machine, the network
yeah,
latency is almost zero.
zero. Yeah, yeah.
So,
This is
so,
a.
so there's no network latency.
I
And
consider this an outlier, kind of a weird. I mean, I understand that you're doing it because it's interesting, but strictly speaking, very few people in a practical sort of deployment world are going to run server and client on the same machine unless they need the client doing something on the server itself. So,
yes,
uh,
exactly. It's just a testing environment, but I intentionally submitted this result there
hmm,
for one reason, because when I reveal more results here you have the same or similar test which I did after receiving the MacBook Pro. Actually, I did two tests. I had a MacBook Pro M1 Max and Mac Mini with the M1 processor in on the same local network. And I tried both ways. So I tried to use Mac Mini as a client, connecting to the MacBook Pro running server. And I tried MacBook Pro running client, which is more usual, and Mac Mini as a server. Interestingly, the results were nearly the same. So
yeah,
even though the M1 Max processor with 64 gigs of RAM is a probably much better ready for running a server and hosting multiple clients than the
uh-huh,
Mac Mini with I believe 8 gigs.
uh-huh,
Uh, with a single client, you don't notice the results. I think where it would be much different is when I tried the multi-user scenario.
right,
But here you can see that the latency is no longer nearly zero. It's almost a millisecond.
uh-huh,
So that's the difference. And if you look at all the tests which end up better than this test, so you see now we have 0.1. So
yeah.
everything
You
that's
know what you need
cost.
to you know what you need to do as a way of breaking the test down by millisecond. Like show me all the ones that are point 0.8 to point 0.12 or something like that, right? So real quick, so let me frame this conversation for some of the more beginner people here real quick. So here's the deal with this real quick is that the latency is the key thing that kills the performance between in FileMaker. It is absolutely the number one thing that you want to deal with. That's why you always put the server. The latency is the delay as the packets, little bits of data go flying across the internet. If you're in, we've covered this in our training. We've covered it here before, but I haven't done it in probably 6 to 12 months. So let me just cover it real quick. So if you have an office environment where you have a FileMaker server sitting next to you in the office, or it's in the same building, the latency will be generally less than about 1.5 milliseconds. Here he was doing zero point 0.8, so he probably doesn't. But if you're in a building like an Apple corporate building and you're on the third floor and on the sixth floor is your server, there's probably routers in there, things like that. It's going to slow it down. But anywhere from 0.2, zero point 0.3 milliseconds up to 1.5. Then above 1.5 to say, and I know it depends on where you're at in the world, but up to say 20 or 30 is like a cross town or a region, right? An area. And then across like the United States from the East Coast to the West Coast, you'll see like 70 milliseconds, right? 80, 90 milliseconds. Any milliseconds that are above about 150 is what was discussed by Claris at one point was that they don't recommend any server configurations above 150. But if I could try to connect to like a European server, like HOnza has a server in the Czech Republic, and I connect from California, the latency could be 200 milliseconds. And so that's what the killer is, and to really to test apples and apple, they say here the kind of analogy, apples to apples and oranges to oranges, you want a similar test, because if you cut the latency out, the test performance goes way up, right? So that's kind of a big deal. So HOnza, yeah, I mean, did I cover that about right? You would I mean, I know that you have fiber optic in your area, which makes it really fast. For all the United States running around saying how great they are, we have very fiber optics only in the big cities, and if you're out in more of a suburban area, it's there is no fiber here. So
Yeah, well covered, and that's one of the key points in deciding on how to do things, because sometimes you can decide how to have your setup. You can decide to have a local server, but sometimes you have to work with what you have. Let's say you have a client that requires remote access to the server from various different places. So you cannot always cut down the latency. So in that case, what comes into play is that not only the overall score, but we also score the individual tests in this test tool. And just like here, when I click the details on one of the tests, which was obviously run uh, on the same machine as the server, uh, it was one with the 0.1 milliseconds. So if you check here, you see that some of the tests have the score around, let's say, 3 or 4. Uh, and some are very, very high, and some are near 1. So those which are near 1, which means they are not much faster than the reference configuration, that means those tests or those techniques are not so much affected by the latency. And that's a great information, because then if you want to you want to create a solution that is running well on a cloud or on a network with high latency, if you focus on using those techniques which do not which are not so much affected by the latency, then you are doing the right way. Obviously, those techniques may be more labor. So this is a great example. These tests, number 12, get and show 1,000 records. These are different kinds of different flavors of the popular technique called virtual list, invented by Bruce Robertson several years ago, I think 20 years ago, maybe. So this technique basically, in principle, minimizes the necessity for communication between client and the server. Instead of asking the server, send me this record, send me that record, send me that record. And if you work with FileMaker in a natural way, you basically it keeps talking to the server. The number of packets that FileMaker Pro in the regular work needs to exchange with FileMaker Server, just as you're browsing in your layout, it's maybe hundreds of packets. So if you have a latency of 200 milliseconds, that means 5 packets can be transferred, but in a second. So to transfer 100 packets between client and a server, that's 20 seconds. Virtualist is a technique which basically minimizes this communication. So what it does is you compile the request, what you want from the server, into a single, for instance, text parameter to a script. Then you run a script on a server. That's a single request. The script runs on the server, processes your request, finds all the data, processes it, sorts it, whatever you want, and returns a single result, which you can receive again in a single packet. And then you parse the result on the local in the client and display it to the user without having to talk to the server. So that's how you minimize the impact of latency, but obviously you pay for it by investing your time, because it's much more difficult to do it that way than just displaying records on a layout. But if you need to work with a FileMaker server running in cloud, and you need to provide a feature that works extremely performant to the client there is way how to do it.
That is
So,
good. That is good stuff there. Let me see. So, Margaret, we have any questions? A good
We
point to ask
do.
questions, I guess.
From
Okay, go ahead.
one, Adelaide. Question. Looking at the bench test, how would we know what score is bad, good, great, acceptable, or unacceptable? Is it all based on one? Question mark.
well, acceptable, unacceptable. Basically, the bench test is comparison tool. So it serves better when you compare two different setups, and you want to decide which is better. Whether you compare two different techniques to do the same thing, which one scores better is the better one. If you want to compare two different configurations of your server, again, what scores better is better for you. You can also decide, instead of relying on the main score, if, for instance, you have a solution that uh, reside, heavily relies on processing data and changing data, then you can focus on just those tests which test the changing data, like these tests for replacing data in a field, or either using replace or loop set field. So these tests specifically are focused on modifying data. If you use the virtual list technique, then you can focus on just those tests which are focused on virtual list technique. I can show you the tool itself here. So this is what the bench test looks like. When you want to use it, you just download the bench test itself, and you download the bench test data. The data comes as a separate download simply because we update the bench test tool much more often than the test data set. The test data set should remain unchanged as long as possible. So you don't have to download the large test data file every time we update bench test. So it's a separate download. So when you open bench test, you get this tool where to get access to all the features, we just ask you for email address so that we stay connected. And here you have tabs for 14 different tabs with all various kinds of tests. You can even use those tests, run those tests locally or directly, manually, by clicking a button. Like, for instance, I think here, how long it takes to calculate all prime numbers lower than 100,000. Okay, so let me change this to a smaller number. We don't want to be here for the next 2 hours. So let's try it here and run it in a abortable script. Okay, we have 0.2 seconds. So let's try to afford 10,000. It will be a little bit longer. So how long it takes to find all prime numbers lower than 10,000? And this specific test is a test that measures the performance of the calculation engine. So this is something that you will focus on when you have a solution where you have a lot of calculations or a lot of conditional formatting, because that's also based on the calculation engine. And here you can see this took 5 seconds to calculate. And it's just a very simple math problem, right? Now, this was specifically a test that I created to test the performance of JavaScript, which we can now quite well leverage in FileMaker 19, and specifically since 19.2 or 3, I think it has become even easier. Now, when I do the same test in JavaScript, you see the speed? And I get the exact same result, but instead of 5 seconds, I only have to wait 152 milliseconds. So here, I just compared two different ways how to do the same thing. And now I decide if it's something that really is performance sensitive, if it really matters whether it takes long or short. I know that for this particular feature, it's good to spend a little bit of time to learn how to do this in JavaScript, because my clients will be happy. If it's something that doesn't have to be so fast, I can use the calculation engine and I'll be just fine. But I have this tool to compare what is faster, what is slower, in what situation. And if I want to compare environments, like different configurations of servers, or different versions of FileMaker, or different versions of operating system, or different network setups, for that, this tool provides the standard test, which is basically a set of different combinations of all these tests from the 14 tabs. And you can even create your own configurations. So here it comes with some predefined configurations, but you can create a new one, and you can configure which test scripts to run, on what number of records you want to perform them. So, for instance, if your solution is going to work with just 1,000 records and never more, you don't really care how it performs with 100 million records. But if you want to process a lot of data, then you are probably more interested in knowing how it will perform with many data records. So this is all configurable, and you can run the automated test set on those different configurations. And because it's pre-configured, you just take the solution, copy it to the different configurations, and run the same test, where the only difference is the configuration that you are testing. Then you get the score which differs, and the score will tell you, well, this setup is faster and this is slower.
Okay, cool. Real quick, so there is a question here from David Angel, and David asked the question, which is kind of an interesting question. I know that we're dealing with a lot of very, I would say, not macro tests, but these are more micro specific test points. But David's asking for your general opinion, HOnza. Have you seen a difference in performance if there are separate files in a FileMaker solution for one app, i.e. for an application to have like, so he's talking about the split UI data separation model, right? So what's your opinion of that in terms of performance?
Well, this is quite interesting question, and it would be even more interesting if we also had John Marcos Born here as another guest, because he is a famous fan of single file configuration, and he even made a statement that in today's FileMaker there is no good reason to use a separation model. I have seen situations where having a single file performs better than a separation model, and I have seen the opposite as well. So it depends on the use. The most important aspect, and it was even more important until FileMaker 17 and partially 18, is that basically FileMaker file is a resource, and if you need an exclusive access to the resource, no one else can get that exclusive access until you make it available. So for instance, if you have a script that writes data to 5 different tables, and those 5 different tables are in the same file, it's becoming better now, but until 17, there was no way for those 5 scripts to run simultaneously. Until first one was finished, the other ones had to wait to get access to the right access to that file. So it was a great performance technique specifically for multi-user solutions to have the database split into smaller parts, especially when it was common to having one user or one script needing to write into one part and another user needing to write into the other one.
All right, so let me jump in on this. So I agree with everything Hans has said. John Thatcher, I remember him talking about this. He's a retired engineer from Claire's. He talked about this very specifically, the overhead of locking records, shall we say. So the overhead of locking the record and writing to it. It's not just the fact that other people can't, it keeps them from writing to it too, but there's this overhead of managing the locks. So one thing we've never really talked about is the overhead of managing the locks. After FileMaker 17, Claire started working on this to optimize this. I don't know where it's at, but I would simply tell you this. If you are a new developer, if you're a new developer and you're learning the platform, use a single file. Don't argue with me, just do it, okay? Because I don't want to have to deal with you not understanding the platform because you've got spread everywhere, okay? So if you're brand new to the platform and you say you have, let's say, less than 5 or 6, 7 years of programming experience, you should be using a single file for simplicity. If you have more experience and you have solutions with, say, less than 100 users, probably a single file is fine. It gets into a spot where you're trying to scale the solution. So one way of scaling the solution, there's two ways of scaling the FileMaker solution. I can tell you which way I would do it. We've talked about this here before, not recently. I did talk to Jesse Barnum. He'll be coming back to talk about server synchronization and replication soon. But if you say you have a FileMaker solution and we have a bunch of people and a bunch of data and you're having performance issues, one way of improving the performance is to break the files out separately. And if you're gonna break the files out separately, I would go ahead and put each of the files on a different FileMaker server. Okay, that will make the servers much happier. But that's kind of a pain in the and you've taken your solution and chopped it in little bits and spread it out. And you better be a very highly organized individual. If you're going to do that, you know what I'm talking about. Every one of you knows whether you're an organized person or you're a disorganized person. If I go to your desk and it looks like someone took the fast food McDonald's trash can and dumped it on your desk, if you treat your databases like you treat your desk, don't do this. Okay, you're not capable of keeping it running and not being fired by your boss. So, but if you're like a highly organized individual, and then you could do that. My suggestion, however, instead of going down that road, would be to use server replication, where you set up a server even in the same building if you have that many people in the building, but generally it's regional. So you put a West Coast server in the United States, an East Coast server in the United States, maybe an Ireland server, a Germany server, an Australia server, and then you have these servers replicate the data. So you have full complete solutions in each location. The closest people are accessing their server, and then the server replicates across the other servers in the background. Okay, it works pretty good. It's the way I would handle it. But basically, what David Angel's talking about is scalability once you cross some line, depending upon what that line looks like, how much data you have, how many simultaneous users, the kind of hardware you have on the server side, how much data is really being moved by the user. If they're just doing lookups and reading the data, but if they're actually pounding on the server and pushing edits and changes, it gets to a point where it will slow down. Every system slows down. And so your tactic, one, is to code more efficiently. First thing you code more efficiently, use BenchTest to look at the better server configuration. So you're trying to optimize your single server with your single file. And then you're like, well, I'm going to need to maybe break the file down into multiple tables down to multiple files and spread them out. Or you could actually take the entire single file and drop it in different regions, which would be the way I would go. But either way, you're going to get a performance benefit at the expense of complexity of managing your system, right? I mean, HOnza, that's the thing. If you have 20 solutions and you break two tables into each file and you move it to 10 different servers, you've got a lot of management there that you have to do that you didn't have to do previously. So.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. Basically, what I wanted to say is if you break the solution into multiple files, you can get some benefits, but you also get a lot of overhead on the development side, on the management side, and also there's some overhead for FileMaker to deal with it. So you need to know why you're doing it. You need to be sure that it's going to give you more benefits than what it's going to cost you. But there is a way how to use splitting FileMaker solution to multiple files as a performance optimization method. And especially when you also try to do things like what Vince Menano is promoting in his presentations called being optimistic in the pessimistic world. If you have never seen it, I suggest you look for it. It's another level of performance optimization for uh, long high latency networks. But if you're a beginner, BenchTest might be a good way for you to start thinking about performance, because you can easily just compare 2 or 3 different ways how to do the same thing in a single file solution. And just the fact that you start thinking about how fast this will be before you write it, that's the best starting point for your solutions to perform well. Not just don't just do things, but think about how fast they will be and how much slower they will become as the solution grows in terms of amount of data that it needs to process.
Okay, that's actually really awesome. We do have one more question though for you, Peter, on Discord. Can it be set up on a server and test all PCs or Macs in a network, or does it have to be installed separately on each machine?
I think he's talking about your BenchTest app. You install it on the clients, right?
That's a great question. So basically, this set of files, these are 4 files, and if you want to test performance of the FileMaker server, basically you put all these 4 files on the FileMaker server, host them there. If the server is exposed to public, I suggest you change the full access password to something else, so that no one can hack your server. But basically, you put it on the server, and then you just open FileMaker Pro and open that file from the server. This file is ready to test from multiple machines at the same time. So when you connect to the same server from multiple clients, here in the corner it tells you number of workers ready. And basically, when you connect to it from multiple clients, the first one that connects is called master, and everyone else is considered worker. So if you then connect from the other clients, they will automatically know, well, there is already another client connected which acts as a master. So let's switch to the worker mode. So in that case, you can have 10 clients connected, and from the first one, which is the master, you just start the test by clicking the Run Now button, or here on the once you have the test data ready, it will tell you start the standard test, and the test will start simultaneously at the same time on all the other clients. So you really test simultaneous users at the same time.
All right, Stu has a question here. Can BenchTest be used to test 2 different techniques in my own solution, or is it only the predefined tests that are in BenchTest? If I can test 2 different techniques in my solution, how might I do that?
Okay, it's probably better to use it just as an inspiration. Basically, if you open the scripts in the BenchTest, you will see that every test consists of 2 parts. One is called a wrapper, and the other one is called core. The core is the script that performs the technique, whatever it is, and the wrapper is responsible for preparing the test data and measuring the time, how long it takes for the core to run. So you can copy any of these wrappers and use it to call, instead of using the core which is built into BenchTest, you can use it to call the script in your solution, and it will take care of the measurement for you. It's good to instead of replacing the built-in test, to just duplicate it and create a new test so that it doesn't interfere with the built-in tests. But if you examine these wrappers, you will see that it's not so difficult to understand. Basically, before running the main script here, we collect the start timestamp. After it runs, we collect the end timestamp and some data about what we were running it with, and that's it.
So the bench test is unlocked. It's an unlocked solution, so you can take it apart.
Yes. You open it and you just click a green button that asks you to subscribe to our mailing list. So it's essentially not free. It's for email address, but no money to pay for it.
Yeah, well, I agree with that model. That's a good model. So, Stu, did we answer your question on that? It's a good question. So basically, you take this thing, you load up on the server, and then you can fire it off. Okay, this is what it says. And I like Lynn from Austin. Lynn's great, but Lynn says, "Can you repeat what you said about JSON, HOnza?"
JSON. I didn't talk about JSON, but
Oh, okay. Does it slow performance? Right. JSON's a format, right? Oh, I think you're JavaScript. You're talking about JavaScript,
yeah.
right? JavaScript.
Okay.
I think that's what Lynn's talking about, because JSON is just a way of, it's like XML, but it's not XML. It's a format of organized. Yeah, JavaScript. Lynn says JavaScript. So explain. Okay, back up. So real quick. So let me tee this up for HOnza real quick. So real quick. So HOnza had a suggestion. I think it was HOnza had a suggestion today. I'm waving my hands again here. HOnza had a suggestion the other day, and he goes to Claris going, "Hey, the JavaScript is so much faster doing some of these calculations. Why are the Claris calculations so slow? You guys should get your stuff together." He said it very nicely. And either allow us just to call the JavaScript functions easily, or maybe use some of their code so FileMaker runs faster. Because HOnza, when he showed you it was taking 5 seconds to do something in FileMaker to generate primes or whatever it was, and then it was 0.15 seconds, he didn't pick that by accident. That wasn't a random pick. He knows that a lot of the JavaScript functions are modern and much faster than what Claris has done, so Claris should take advantage of that. So I've teed this up for you now, HOnza. So now,
okay,
go.
Let me take it from this perspective. Every tool is good for the thing that it's built for. Okay, so one of the benefits of FileMaker obviously is that it is easy to use. And to make it easy to use, FileMaker doesn't ask you whether your numbers are going to be from less than 32,768 or more. You don't care. As a general user, you just have a number, right? So FileMaker is built in a way that even if you do math with numbers like 10 digits long, like this long number, and another number like this, it still works. It still calculates correctly. No mistakes, no errors. If you do something like multiplication, it still works. It still calculates. So FileMaker is so good to you as a user that it doesn't care how precise or less precise you want to be. The point is that in order to be so user-friendly, it's also unfortunately inefficient in some ways. So for instance, if you only deal with numbers between 1 and 100, and you want to do a simple math between those numbers, FileMaker still uses the same calculation engine that is ready for the big numbers. That's one example. Instead of analyzing what you do or asking you or letting you as a developer tell it, well, switch to simple math because we don't need big math, it still uses the big math for everything. So what my suggestion to Claris was, let us, in some cases, because in most cases we don't deal with big math, we don't do scientific calculations, maybe we do just simple accounting and we don't need higher numbers than millions. but we need to process large amounts of data and very quickly. Let us do it in a way that we just decrease the precision or whatever. What languages like JavaScript do is they by default use data types which are limited. So if you use integer in JavaScript or PHP or C or C++, whatever, you have to specify the limits. You have to specify whether it's 2-byte integer, 4-byte integer, but whatever doesn't fit in that limit, it simply generates an error. But the benefit is that it runs much faster. So as I showed here with the test of calculating the prime numbers, what takes FileMaker calculation engine to calculate in 5 seconds, JavaScript can calculate in a fraction of a second. But that's because this is a math problem that fits in that limited data type which JavaScript uses. But in many cases, we don't need more. And in those cases when we don't need more, turning to a language like JavaScript may be the performance optimization technique to use. And I have one thing to quickly show you, a project that I'm currently involved in. Just a very brief look at my development screen and PHP script here. I want to show you more. It's just about processing data, doing a lot of calculations where what is involved here is automated planning of projects in time. And because it's a complex problem, it can take a lot of time. And here I'm working with data that just to process in FileMaker using usual ways takes half an hour to several hours. And just by exporting the raw data from FileMaker, processing it with PHP, and importing it back to FileMaker, we can cut the time from several hours to half a second. So it's always about using the right tool for the right thing. And sometimes just the fact that something is not performing very well in FileMaker does not mean the FileMaker is not the right tool for the whole solution. It just means that you hit a single point where it would be good to combine FileMaker with another tool, which is good for that particular problem. And the fact that FileMaker 19 now can perform JavaScript by running a single script step in WebViewer, and also from JavaScript to run FileMaker script to give you the result back, which is so simplified in FileMaker 19.3 and later, this gives us another way how to combine these tools together, how to take the benefits of FileMaker and also leverage the power of JavaScript where we need it.
All right, Margaret, if you want to go to Peter's
yes,
question real quick,
we've
and
got
then I'll deal with, and then I'll take Stu.
Got it. We'll follow up Peter real quick, because Peter had his follow-up question. Does that mean that FileMaker calculates big math while JS is crashing?
Well, I'm not sure JS is crashing there because if you want to do big math in JavaScript or PHP or any language, you can still do that, but you need to use specialized libraries for that, which are ready to do that. And those will do the math much slower than the basic math that's generally used there.
Okay, so real quick, Stu had a question here, and we are coming kind of towards the end of our time here. We want to make sure we have any questions that if you folks have any questions. Stu asked a really good question. So basically what all the developers here are trying to do is watch this presentation and derive some practical meaning from it. It's what my goal whenever I'm involved with these live streams is to make sure there's a practical meaning of this. How do they apply it practically to their lives? So here's what Stu asked. That's what Stu essentially asked, but I will read Stu's question. Can you take some results and help us understand how to interpret them and what we might do with the interpretation, i.e. buy a new Mac, prohibit Windows from running the app, laugh with a smiley face, port a bunch of scripts to PSOS, convert scripts to custom functions, etc. So I think here's the deal with this, Stu. So let me just give you my experience. It's not different. It's different than other people's experience, but it's generally very similar. You start off as a basic developer. What I talked about a little before, you build an application, you put a bunch of data in it. If you're building a solution and no one is screaming or complaining, there's nothing to worry about. Okay, it's what Jacob Taylor calls squeal testing. When the customers start squealing because they're waiting for something to happen because it takes too long. So I hate to be kind of reactionary like this, but you could spend your entire life as a beginning developer, and I'm not saying a beginning developer, so I'm talking about this generically, Stu. But you could spend your entire beginning life trying to worry about performance when really it's not a concern that you'll have to deal with for a number of years because you're not that far along in your progression. So what normally happens, you build a solution, you start getting some more experience, eventually you think about taking the certification test, maybe, and you end up getting to a point where customers start squealing, that they squeal because something is wrong. So then you have to triage why it's slow, okay? And so the tools and your techniques, you named them right off the top of your head, which is great. So if you have a calculation, moving the calculation into the custom as a custom function changes the engine that's being involved. It goes way, way, way faster. That's a good one. Taking stuff and PSOSing is another really great technique, putting it on server. Claris is continuing to see the benefits of having server do things for you. You'll see that in future versions of the FileMaker platform. Not a giant secret, but common sense. If the server could do more for you, if it's not too busy, then that helps the user so they don't have to process a bunch of stuff. So that goes for scripts. It goes for a lot of stuff that we're talking about here. Now, so the obvious things to me in my training are dump it to PSOS 1, dump it to custom functions 2. Then you get into other interesting areas because we had Leland Long on here a while back. He did a presentation. HOnza here's talking about too, is taking things and dumping them into JavaScript. Leland Long had some that's the guy who built Pac-Man in FileMaker, right? Remember that? He had Pac-Man running in FileMaker, and it wouldn't work without dumping a bunch of the stuff into JavaScript. So FileMaker is doing the work. It's not a JavaScript Pac-Man. They already have those. He built it in FileMaker, but some of the calculations he runs, he shoots them off with JavaScript, and they come back, and they're so much faster. And so it's an interesting combination of coming up with a list of tools. So, for example, Hans is just now talking about PHP, but if you don't have a background in PHP, you've never done that before, would you go down that road? I don't know. I would focus on the most common things you're likely to benefit you going forward, which would be, I would do, in this order, I would do custom functions and PSOS. Those are two. In fact, probably PSOS first, then custom function. And then I would look at dumping it in JavaScript somehow. And then if that doesn't work, dumping it out and having another tool do the work for you entirely. Also consider that you might have calculations that you can't run in real time because they're just too fat, right? And so you need to run them at midnight. The results are pre-cached, right? I'm using my fingers in a little way. Pre-cached calculations that are waiting for people. So when they press the button, it feels like, oh, it's live, it's up to date, yet it only updates at midnight or 2 in the morning every day, right? We've talked about that before. There's a lot of tools in our arsenal. The BenchTest is giving us, the biggest thing it does is give us a relative speed between different setups. So Peter Geens or Lynn, someone was talking about the idea of testing a Mac versus Windows somewhere, or it was Alpha Lima 92. A Coburn 73 on Twitch is going, well, can I compare? Can I use the BenchTest to compare between Mac and Windows, like a local Mac server and an AWS server? Absolutely. So if they want to do that, what's the easiest way? The answer is yes. You're going to take this software here. I'm going to draw. I can't see on my screen, but I'm drawing on here. You take this software. You're going to install HOnza software on the Mac. You're going to run it there or on the Mac server. You're going to install it on the AWS server. And then what tests would they do to get a best all-around performance with a single client talking to the server? HOnza, what would you recommend? Because there's a lot of buttons in here and a lot of things. What would be the best test to get a general?
Well, if you just download it fresh, and I have tampered with the data, so it now gives me the option to either generate test data or download test data. But if you just download the fresh test data and don't do any modification with it, these two buttons get replaced with a single button, which is called Run the Standard Test.
There you go. Run the standard test. Okay, yeah.
And that's it.
And then that'll give you a score, right? That'll give you a score.
Yes. And then that will give you a score that basically it runs the test. It actually, the standard test consists of 111 individual tests. It runs them all. Then you submit the results to our server. And at the same time, it downloads the reference results and give you the score, not only for the whole setup, but also for individual tests. So you can, and when you run multiple tests, you can just enable charts here and compare them in a chart.
Okay.
So this is what you get. And you can also have like a overall chart here for the, if you go to compare, you can compare by charts, not only the overall score, but also the individual tests. So here you have individual charts by test. So you can go and see, well, this is how it scores for finds, and this is how it scores for replies, and so on. So you just run the same thing on two or multiple configurations, and then you compare them with each other.
There you go. So Alpha Colburn, A Colburn 73, get a good answer for you there. Hopefully you like that. Okay, so David Angel says that the tool needs to have an artificial intelligence that after it runs all these numbers, it just says, it's artificial intelligence says go use AWS or something. It tells you what to do, right? We don't want to interpret the numbers. We just need it to like go here and do this and shut up, right? Or go here and do this and shut up, right? So that's a joke, but you get the idea, right? So it's a lot of numbers, and so and that's always been the thing with HOnza. When HOnza gets in the weeds, he gives you the numbers, which are great, but sometimes you just need like one score. Just give me the score and let me make some decisions about what I need to do, right? Because a lot of times, it's, if you ran a test between an AWS server that was really new and say a Mac server that's local, that's maybe a little bit older, you might have a couple tests that go one way, lean one way, and a couple tests that lean the other way. It might not be universal. But if you had two identically pieces of hardware and one's local and one's on the cloud somewhere, the cloud is always going to be slower because of the latency. But once again, it's, the hardware that AWS uses are big refrigerator-sized machines with like, and they virtualize, it's like 100 processors or something like that with terabytes and terabytes of RAM memory, and they virtualize little slices out, and they sell the slices to everyone. You buy a slice. It's your slice. How is that slice going to compare against a Mac Mini? No way of knowing until you run the test, really. So, all right, cool. Well, it's a really good day. Good day. HOnza, anything else we have? Because we are kind of heading towards the end here.
Well, I think that's enough. Maybe just one thing, and that's our primary focus on business is providing services and taking care of our customers. So it's not just the tools that we have online that you can get from us, but if you need advice, if you need help, you can turn to us, and we can help you with that. So even if you just run tests and want to interpret the results, and you are not sure what to think about it, you can turn to us, and we can provide consulting and help you to make the right decision.
HOnza has a great team of developers. I want to say this officially. So he has a great team of consultants and developers that do a lot of great things. and he's based in the Czech Republic, but he's worldwide. He's done projects all over the world. And they've got some interesting little subsets of skills that are specialized, right? If you want to build a iOS application, the FileMaker iOS application, you still have your tools that make that simpler. You still have tools that make that simpler, HOnza?
Yes, yes,
Well,
definitely.
well, you should come back and spend another day and show us that, because going the old way of because we've created a training course for this, and there wasn't really enough people that wanted to build iOS applications that deal with the App Store, deal with it. But HOnza has a way of making it much simpler, frankly, much more cost effective to get it done. He has tools for that. He can provide consulting to help you with that. I think that's a very big value in the FileMaker community. So if you want to come back and talk about that, but yeah, he's got the team that builds this stuff. And how big is your team now, HOnza? You keep growing. How big are you folks now?
Well, the development or the software team is currently, I believe, 11 or 12 people.
Yeah.
But the whole company is around 50.
Around 50. Wow. Okay.
Yeah, we do also other stuff. We also sell computer hardware. We are the biggest Apple reseller in education in Central Europe. So that's
okay. So yeah, so you don't have 50 FileMaker developers. So in terms of, so let's
no.
just keep apples to
Yeah,
apples.
we have 3 development teams and 1 team of testers. We actually are special in the FileMaker world that we have full-time testers. I have not met anyone in the FileMaker community to have full-time testers yet. So
that's a true statement. You'd be the only company I know that has full-time dedicated testers. That's good.
So,
well, very, very, very impressive, right? Cool. Well, yeah. So HOnza, if you need to buy any Apple hardware in Central Europe anywhere, or you need FileMaker help anywhere out there, you need to look up HOnza, talk to him. How do they find you? 24u.com or 24usoftware.com? What is it?
yeah. Let me just try to switch. It's 24usoftware.com.
Okay. Oh, there it is right here. I just have to read the screen.
Yeah,
there you go.
Exactly.
Cool. All right, everyone. Well, I appreciate it. HOnza, great job. Feel free to come back, talk about your other services, things that you do. That's very, very exciting. Very, very
It was
exciting.
my pleasure.
Okay, awesome. Thank you so much, everyone.
Got a report of an individual up here who may be a FileMaker license. Well, it's potentially expired. Look at the back of that car right there. Looks like the FileMaker license has expired. Sir, I need you to step out of the vehicle. Sir, step out of the vehicle. Sir. Oh, man.